this is Garrett Wong, and I played Ensign Kim on Star Trek Voyager, and you're listening to Kneel Before Pod.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hoorah, and welcome to another edition of Kneel Before Pod. Today we're talking about aliens in honour of 426, or as we call it in this country, the 26th of April.
Alright, not Bill Paxton.
No, well, that too.
Can it be in honour of him?
I'm your host for today, Angus, and warning, there will be spoilers ahead and possible uses of some harsh language. With me, I've got my crack team of ultimate badasses, featuring Natalie.
Hello.
That was badass. Craig.
We mostly podcast at night. Mostly.
And Chris.
Hoorah!
Yeah, that's more like it.
I didn't know that we were supposed to have like little catchphrases.
I just thought
then it
of
would
it.
have been like, oh. Because my favourite one at the moment is they're dead, alright?
Can I go now?
So what we're going to do for
aliens.
the next hour is quote aliens and do nothing else. Yeah.
Yes, and Natalie will perfect her Newt impression.
Working on it.
So yeah, we're here to talk about aliens. We have already covered the original Alien in a previous podcast. If you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend it. It would make a lovely companion to this episode.
We hope.
But yes, Aliens, the sequel. Some might say an improvement. Thoughts, Craig, initially?
I think whether it's an improvement or entirely depends on your mood. If I want to watch an action film, I'd watch this one. But if I want to watch a horror experience, I would watch the first one. But I love this movie. I think it does a lot of groundwork for what would become essentially cliches in science fiction, you know, in terms of the colonial marines, all the technology, the catchphrases, the armour, the look of everything is just kind of, it bleeds into games and films from then on.
Yeah,
so yeah,
I'd agree.
like it.
Chris, initial thoughts?
Same here, pretty much. Craig said exactly what I wanted to say. You know, it's a different film from the first, and it's one of those, before it was even sort of written on the piece of paper in front of me, best sequel ever with a question mark. I mentioned to my dad last night that I was going to re-watch it before the podcast. He says, it's the best sequel ever. So I can't really go against him, really.
It's a fairly common opinion, I think. And Natalie, what are your initial Aliens thoughts?
Well, I feel like Aliens, out of all of the Alien movies, is one that I've seen the most. It actually took me until you, Craig, and myself went to see Alien at the cinema that I was like, oh, I don't know if I've actually seen Alien before, because I've literally just watched Aliens like over and over again.
You're
so
far more familiar with the sequel.
Yeah, like I know that one. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of imagery that stands out for me that kind of haunted a lot of my childhood. So, I think you're saying like it's not horror, but for me as like an 8-year-old, it's pretty terrifying.
An 8-year-old?
7?
7-year-old?
I don't know, it's pretty young.
That's pretty horrific. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It obviously picks up immediately after the original.
57 years immediately. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you find Ripley in the same place that we last saw her. But the movie turns everything that we've seen before on its head. It just kicks into high-octane action gear pretty quickly, introduces you to a whole cast of colonial marines and their sort of bravado. And obviously, instead of just one alien to deal with, creeping around dark corridors, there's tons. There's tons and tons, hundreds at least. So,
yeah.
Do you think it was a good idea to flip it on its head and take it a different direction, Natalie?
It doesn't feel like a different direction to me though, because it's the first one that I saw. So I feel like...
But if you think about them sort of sequentially, I mean, you've got your original, the dark, creepy haunted house in space, as we said last time.
Oh, so we did.
And then this is just all action, all out.
Well,
pulse rifles.
I don't know if
blasting.
It is like all action. There's a lot of like political undertonage that
it takes over an hour before you see an alien. Yeah.
Yeah, like they do have like they try and develop that thing with the guy who's kind of like wears a suit in space. I don't know why.
Spacesuit?
It's not a spacesuit.
All right.
So, I don't know, I find it hard to compare it to the first one. As it is for me, the first one. Sorry. Ask Craig, he'll know.
Craig, what do you think?
I think it is a good idea to change stuff up, because how many sequels do we watch that are just the original but bigger? And it's so they could have went for a horror thing again with more people to get killed, and that would have been boring. Or that would have been the third one. But in this one, it kind of shows you what the franchise is capable of. You get lots of expanded stuff. You get an idea of what life is like outside of the small bubble that we saw in the first one. We get so much more, and James Cameron really develops the universe in a way that wouldn't have happened if you'd just done the same again. So I think it's great. It shows the viability.
Yeah, and I think you don't really learn all that much about the characters in the first one, but then obviously you get kind of introduced to this backstory of Ripley's and how she's has this daughter back on Earth that she's now kind of outlived. Chris, what do you think? Do you think that as well as kind of beefing up the action, there's they develop the character of Ripley, which would then go on to kind of she'd star in a couple more sequels and become a bit of an icon.
Yeah, I think they developed it really well, and that, like Natalie says in the first bit, it's a bit slow in sort of introducing you to this 50 years on the universe and what they've done and expanding and colonisation, and they do deal a little bit with how Ripley's dealt with the fact that she's lived her own daughter. She promised she'd be back within months, and instead she's missed the entire life of her child. Yeah, it's
yeah, but that's a risk that you take though when you go to space.
I suppose when you go to cryosleep.
Yeah.
Well, you have to wonder how much of society moves on while people are sleeping. There's got to be a lot of times where people just wake up and everything's changed. Although the Weyland-Yutani Corporation always endures, apparently.
I think it's weird that I feel really familiar with the movie, and I kind of associate it with the Marines and the action side. But watching it again, you kind of, I personally kind of forget about the whole the loss that Ripley goes through at the beginning, and obviously then that kind of goes on to colour her relationship with Newt when she eventually comes across the wee girl that they find. And that, I think that plays a big part in the movie, which is often kind of overlooked because it's thought of as being this kind of bombastic action sequel to the original sort of more stripped back version.
Yeah, and Ripley losing her daughter thing is obviously we do spend an hour just kind of with her dealing with that, before everything kind of kicks off. But it is weird how it does sort of get pushed into the background, but it's easy to forget that that's the kind of central conflict, well, not conflict, but the central emotional arc of the film, because it's kind of her relationship with Newt underpins everything, and it just so happens there's aliens killing everyone in the background. It's kind of that human story that grounds the sci-fi-ness. But I forget about Newt being in this film sometimes, when I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, that's what I mean as well. I think that it's, as you've said, it kind of drives the whole arc, and yet my first impression or my first thoughts of it are about, space marines blasting hundreds and hundreds of aliens. Natalie, thoughts? Ripley-Newt relationship?
I think she's looking for, or they're both looking to have that sort of void filled. She's just become aware that her daughter, who she last knew, was 10, and Newt has lost her entire family, so they are supposed to, I suppose, come together and sort of be like a wee mini family for each other. I don't know if it works super well, but it's definitely quite cute to watch when she's making her open up to her and tells her that her name's not Rebecca. They do sort of play off a wee bit with each other, but I don't know if they're given enough. But then it's not about them. It's not about...
I don't know, maybe it is all about motherhood. I mean, she comes up against an alien queen who's, pumping out eggs and looking after her brood.
Yeah. And then she kills them.
Yeah.
So
You have to wonder where that
what's she
thing
saying?
was in the first one.
Yeah, just hanging out.
Having a sleep.
Yeah, on a chaise long somewhere.
Aye, but if it was about motherhood, then she'd be like, then that alien deserves to be a mother, so I'm going to leave you to it, let you have your alien babies, and I'm going to go away and do my own thing.
Well, she's protecting her own now surrogate child against someone who's protecting her actual children.
Why is there not enough, like, space in the universe?
There's enough room for all of us.
Yay, for everyone to exist.
Even if you're an acidic space alien, you know, there's space for you.
There is! Like, come on! We can't presume that we're... Like, I actually agreed with the bad guy at one point because he says something like, they talk about wanting to leave the planet and destroy it. Or not the planet, whatever it is, the little colony. And they're like, oh, we'll destroy it from space. And then the guy's like, well, that's not your decision to make if that species survives or not. And that's true, like, there is enough space for them all. But talking about space, right? Isn't it weird when Ripley's been hanging about for 57 years, going through core places and stuff, and then the guy goes, yeah, it's like 1 in 1,000 that we found you. Out of the whole universe.
Well, it's a very small...
1,000?
It's a very small craft, and space is very, very big.
Yeah, so how's it only 1 in 1,000? Like, she could have gone anywhere in 57 years.
Maybe she drifted past a lot of inhabited planets.
Mentally.
It's also possible that that what's his name, that Burke is not very smart and just says things.
Maybe. That's a
Could be.
good way of covering
true as
up
well.
for the crap that they've come out with. But 1 in 1,000.
He's no scientician, remember.
Aye, but I was like, 1 in 1,000? Mate, how big's the universe? Just been reading about how many 54 million light years like a black hole is away from us. So there's a lot of space.
Alright, before we dive too deeply into the character motivations and the plot, etc., Chris, you mentioned before that this is considered, or by many people, the best sequel ever. I just wanted to know what you guys think in terms of sequels, where this ranks. Craig, what do you think?
Personally, I prefer Terminator 2.
Oh, yes.
Judgment Day?
Yeah. Back to the Future 2 as well. Empire Strikes Back, which could be considered a sequel, although it's just another chapter. Who knows? The whole what is a Star Wars film in relation to another Star Wars film is another debate. But,
Well,
it's a very
that
good
debate
sequel.
is addressed in Scream 2 itself, a sequel.
Yeah. It's a good sequel, and I do like the sequels that do something a bit different, and the 3 that I've described, the 4 that I've described, all do things a bit differently. But yeah, it's up there with the best of sequels.
A quick Google kind of brings up quite a few lists where this is, features in the top 3 multiple times. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think it's one of the better ones. It does something different with the original material. It still keeps the tension and everything there, because despite the fact you kind of know what they're going to be going into to an extent, you still feel all that tension. Because all the characters around are sort of ignorant and going, yeah, well, it's going to be nothing. We're going to be able to deal with this easy. Even if there is something there, and you're sitting going, no, we know what you're going into. So yeah, I like it.
And Natalie, you've already kind of mentioned that you might have seen this before you saw the original.
No,
so
I did. I didn't. It's not a might have.
So does that kind of colour your opinion on it as a sequel?
I think it sort of changes a wee bit. But if we're talking about sequels, does Cool Runnings have a sequel?
Maybe it's got a spiritual sequel.
Alright, I don't know why, but in my head, like, he said something about a sequel, and I was like, the best sequel? What could be the best sequel? And I was like...
Cool Runnings.
I don't know why.
Lost in New York.
Yeah. My head went straight to Cool Runnings, I don't know why.
I think this might be the best sequel. I mean, Terminator 2 is a good shout as well.
No,
but,
I think Terminator 2 is, like, brilliant.
But think about, like, so many people who are fans of this
what about
series...
Home Alone? Nah, Home Alone 2.
Fans of the Alien series might list this as their favourite entrant in the series. So, lots of people considering this...
Do you mean because it's, like, considered better than the first one, and that makes it the ultimate, like, sequel
Yeah,
land.
well, I mean, they're so different that it is tough to compare properly, like for
They
like.
are so different.
But I think enough people probably consider this the best one in the series.
But I think that's true of Terminator.
What, you don't like?
I think that
Salvation.
I think most people will prefer the second one over the first one.
Well, that's kind of why I said I agree with you on Terminator.
So then you can't say that because the people who watch Alien consider
really,
Aliens better.
It's all down to James Cameron.
Did he direct Terminator 2?
Yeah,
He did.
and Piranha 2. I don't know if that's any better than Piranha 1.
I don't know. Like, I don't have a big thing of what all the sequels in the world are. There's probably
All of the sequels in the world.
I feel like there might be.
Right, okay, is it better than Ice Age 2?
Well, you can't compare
Kung Fu
a sequel
Panda 2.
to another. Kung Fu Panda 2 is pretty
I
good.
thought you might say that.
Toy Story 2.
Oh, see, like, seriously. But you can't compare Aliens to Toy Story 2, and you can't compare Aliens to Kung Fu Panda 2.
D2, The Mighty Ducks.
You can compare them in the sense that they're. You can compare them in the sense that they're both sequels to films that were also good.
But you can't compare them to each other. But you'd have to only compare it to the movie that came out before it.
Right.
No, seriously, because you could only compare Aliens to Alien. You could only compare Toy Story 2 to Toy Story on how good a sequel it was, because you can't cross those sequels over different movies.
Right. One thing I think makes this a great sequel is it introduces a whole lot of new characters who I feel also become almost as iconic as Ripley, and probably more so for me than the characters in the original.
Almost none of which were born at the time of the first film.
What do you mean almost all? Aren't they all? They're not 57. None of them are going to be born.
There's got to be someone on the ship that's over 57.
Does it look like it? They're about...
Bishop, maybe?
They're like mid
No,
late
Bishop was an
20s,
upgraded
30s.
model. Yeah.
He might have been upgraded from an old version. He might have had a patch.
Maybe.
Reused the chassis.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So what do you think of...
none of the characters were born in the first one anyway. Yeah, which is
Right.
strange when you think about it. When they're all the same age.
Apart from Ripley.
Relatively.
Ripley and
And the
Jonesy.
cat.
And
Jonesy.
the cat.
Jonesy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the cat the first cat? Like, did he reprise his role or was he dead?
Don't know.
Did anyone look up?
Did anyone look
If
up
it was
to
the
see
original
the original Jonesy?
Looking it up.
I can hear you typing. Well, wait.
Doesn't say.
What? Do they always say, like, Beethoven was played by Beethoven? Do you know what I mean?
You mean the dog?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, you've mentioned the man in the spacesuit, Burke, the baddie, the antagonist.
Yeah.
Chris, what do you think of Paul Reiser in this role?
And you know what? I think he did pretty well in the role. It's a sort of proper corporate baddie, though, isn't it? It's trying to okay. What we'll do is we'll infect you both, and then I'll get them through customs, and then we could reuse these aliens. And you're thinking, no, everyone will die. That's a bad idea. It's bad choices. And I don't even know if by the end he actually regrets any of his choices at all. It's as if he just doesn't learn as he goes round.
Yeah, he is a proper slimy corporate guy. I thought that might be a kind of reaction to 80s culture that was going on at the time when this was made. Paul Reiser, probably more known for comedic roles, but I think he is quite... I mean, he works as the kind of slimy, spineless company man. And I agree as well. I think that... Sorry, go on.
I seem to remember most of his roles where he's a bit of an asshole. Maybe I'm just confusing him with other people, but it seems like he's the asshole in everything he's in.
So well versed in assholery.
Well,
Natalie, any thoughts about Burke as a baddie?
He's an asshole. But thing is though, that's a good thing. Like, I feel like I have such a strong reaction to him because his character is played very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was a bit like meh about him, then I'd be like, oh, they've kind of wasted an opportunity. But he's such a blank. And
Is that you stopping yourself from swearing?
I censored myself.
All right, okay.
Because the word I wanted to use is terrible, and yeah. So,
I think it's interesting that, again, in the original, the baddie was the alien. Okay, Ash turned out to be a bit of a baddie, but in this one there is actually a human antagonist who is kind of working against his fellow humans, even while there's a load of creepy xenomorphs trying to get in and drag them off to be impregnated.
Yeah, he's trying to impregnate them.
I mean, who's worse, him or them?
Yeah, obviously him, because he's betraying his own kind.
Well, I mean, you can't hate the aliens, you know, in the same way that you can't hate lions or whatever, you know, anything that will...
Does anyone hate lions?
Oh my god.
In the context of if they're...
Angus! Oh my god.
That guy that paid to shoot him.
Fucking people who pay to do that to animals
Hate lions.
can fuck
I don't know,
off.
bad example, but you could... well, you can't really hate the aliens because they're just a force of nature, you know, like in zombie films, like the zombies are usually side to whatever else is going on because they're just something that will show up to cause problems at some point, but they're like, it's the equivalent of a hurricane or something like that, you know, there's nothing you can do about it, you just have to deal with it. But, so you can't really hate them, so that's where it's good to have a human, or in the case of the first one, an android antagonist, someone that's actively working against the interests of the group that really needs to be dealt with. It kind of focuses your hatred. The aliens you can be terrified of, but you can't really hate them.
Well, you can hate them for trying to occupy the same land as humans, but I guess aliens were there first. So
And what were
really,
they
it's their
doing
planet.
the whole time between the Nostromo leaving and the colony being set up?
Sleeping. You don't know their incubation period. And obviously, like, the big mother alien, like, she was maybe really, really tired, and time works differently for them.
Well, they have to gestate. Yeah, they have to gestate inside a host, don't they? So, without hosts, there can be no aliens. Really.
Also, like, right, so this is really bothering me, right? So, I thought I'd figured it out, because we started watching it just before we were doing this, and I was trying to figure out how long Newt has been, like, on her own. Because when I was younger, I thought that she'd been there for months, or maybe, like, a year or years. It felt like a really, really long time. But when they're on the, like, International Wee Space Station, they get told, like, oh no, wait, there's a comment before that when the guy's like, oh, I wasn't going to ask them if it was okay, because you know what they're like, they would say yeah, and it takes 2 weeks for them to tell us. So it takes 2 weeks for information to come back, or 2 weeks for people to, like, get there or something like that. Maybe that's a presumption that I made. But if they lost signal with that colony, and then they went out straight away, and that's maybe, like, 2 weeks, and then Ripley's like, oh, she survived 17 days, or like more than 17 days on her own. Like, more than that without any training or weapons. I'm like, how long is she actually supposed to have been there? Because she can't have been there for that long on her own. Like, it would have to have been, like, just a couple of weeks. And even though the aliens are really scary and that the couple of weeks would actually seem like forever, it's not actually forever. It's a really short amount of time, and she looks like a mess.
Well, it's enough to traumatise you, though, I can imagine. You know, if you're being stuck there. You're right, I think the guy says it takes about 2 weeks to get a reply, so that's about a week for the transmission to get back to Earth, and a week for the transmission to get back to the colony again with a reply. So
maybe it does take a longer because in travel.
Say they were having to check in every day to say, yep, we're here, yep, we're here, yep, we're here. Then it would take a week before that, we're here, not to arrive,
and
if you know what I mean, for them to then, for them then to get back in touch. So, yeah, she must have been there for at least a couple of weeks. But when you first see her in her little sort of den in the air duct, you know, she's got tons of food and stuff, so you can imagine she's just been hiding there, you know, and that's where she's been the whole time, because if she had strolled outside, she'd been dead.
Yeah. And where does... Well, she has been, like, strolling outside, though, because she's moving around, and she's, like, moving around when the humans are there. She doesn't know that humans are there.
She moves around during the day.
Yeah, she's in the air ducts and stuff.
During the day, you say?
Yeah, because we all know when the aliens come out. Mostly at night.
Mostly.
Mostly.
Do you think Newt's good? Is she a good character? She played well.
For me, she's kind of that standard precocious child. She's just kind of, she's very, very smart for her age, and it's kind of almost like an adult's writing what they think a child might talk like, but have no idea. And she's fine. I think she's better as a representation of what Ripley's going through rather than a character on her own.
Yeah, I like her. She's an interesting wee creature. They try and play it out though like that. A used creature only because when you first meet her, that's why the whole concern with time is because it's not just what she looks like or that she's made this den, it's that she's actually like very feral, like in how she moves and how she acts. She doesn't talk. It's like she's not spoken for many years, and her actions of like going into a little corner like the way that she does, or making like little noises like to try and get away and stuff. Like she acts like completely like
maybe her nature prepared her to survive like in that environment, and that's why the rest of the colonists all got dragged off, because she just happened to be a weird feral little kid that was suited to that environment. The survivor. But
she's not like that when we first see her though, because we do get an introduction to her and her family when her father and her mum go out and find the ship, the alien ship. So we see her with her parents and we see her with her brother, but we don't see how she gets back. They never explain. Do they explain that?
Well, yeah, the dad gets...
He gets face suckered.
Gets hugged in the face. And then the mum
does the mum drive them back?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she calls it in, doesn't she? Or do they take
the dad on board and it's like the dad getting back into the colony that then screws everything up for everyone else?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
It seems like they go and investigate again because they end up with more facehuggers in the lab, don't they? So they could only have got one off of him. So they must have went back to investigate, and that's when they've brought more and more and more of them in.
That's real shady shit.
There's that entire chunk of story that kind of happens off screen, where you go from the first discovery of the facehugger to when the Marines get there and there's a lab full of them, some dead, some not, and it's like...
How did they even have a lab ready for that? Like, this is
probably just a standard lab.
Well, I feel like the bad guy, definitely knew that they actually maybe already knew that the aliens were there. And I think that's what they try and, get across. They've put this colony up there to all be eventually impregnated by the aliens, and they've been studying them already. So even at the very start when he's like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about, we've no idea of these things, he's actually bullshitting her because they know exactly what they're sending them all into. And it looks very much like it's very well set up and that they've been studying them for a while.
Well, the company sends the Nostromo there purposefully in the first one. So they know that something's there. I mean, they may never get a report about what it actually is, but you can sort of assume that they maybe sent a scouting expedition between times or whatever else.
Yeah, because it feels very much like the bad guy definitely knows that they are there and that they're being studied, and that his mission is just to go and try and bring something back because there's been some sort of problem.
And remember what's learned in Prometheus. No, let's not remember what was learned in Prometheus.
I liked Prometheus.
When running from a massive space donut, always run left.
Yeah, just don't get rolled over.
That's what was learned from Prometheus.
Space donuts are wacky.
Space donuts.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the colonial marine force that's sent in to deal with this bug hunt? Any particular standout soldiers, aka Marines, from this?
You know there is.
I know you're going to mention.
You know there is.
Paxton.
Yeah.
R.I.P. in peace.
Oh! I'm so angry at his death because he was so beautiful.
I think he's a great character in this. Craig, I don't know if you agree, because I think you think he's only on screen, for bits and pieces, but I think he stands out so much.
Good.
Well, he's the coward of the group, isn't he?
He's not a coward. If he was a coward, he wouldn't even be there.
Well, it's funny because when they're in the dropship, all he does is brag about how much of a badass he is, and then as soon as they're on the ground, all he wants to do is leave and cry.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's so lovable. He's such, and character-wise, and when Ripley has to give him a pep talk and being Newt's done it and she survived, so let's get our shit together and we'll do this. So you're gonna go do this. She really takes control of the new situation that they're in. And you can see him with his wee quivering lip because he's so scared, and it's so I don't know. I really like his character, but I also totally fancied him in this movie, so I'm biased.
I think he's really good, and I think almost every one of his lines is sort of quotable and stands out. I think he does an amazing job to make a sort of supporting character like that, and especially one that is the coward, the yellow one of the group. that he makes a sort of endearing coward, even if he is bragging to begin with and full of all this kind of swag.
Fun fact, the one that gets the most development out of them as well. Out of all the Marines, because he goes from being bragging, showing that he's sort of a bit broken, a bit bleak, to then taking charge in a way towards the end. So he's the one that gets given a bit of development. The rest of them sort of stay pretty much on their base traits from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, Bill Paxton is the only actor that I can think of that has been killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator.
Terminator?
Yeah. He's one of the punks in Terminator 1.
How did I not remember that?
Because it's a very small role and you can barely tell it's him.
Yeah, that's... Oh, okay. I was going to say, that's normally the crap that I remember.
But yeah, he's been killed by all three of the major Hollywood killing machines.
That's impressive.
I think the rest of the Marines, it's interesting that you get this kind of build-up. You get a bit of their relationships with each other in the scenes where they're aboard the Sulaco and coming out of cryosleep, interacting with each other during the meal, and you get a feel for how they all feel about each other. But then quite a lot of them get wiped out really quickly. It's quite a bold move to introduce all these characters just to have, and to give them some interesting traits, just to have them sort of wiped out in one fell swoop.
The cryosleep thing always amuses me because in the first one it's seen as a very kind of slow warm-up process, or even at the start of this one. But you've got them they wake up and they're cracking wise within seconds. And you even get the cigar coming out immediately as soon as the guy wakes up. It's just I wonder if it's just one of those things that gets easier the more you do it, or you just don't admit that you're struggling.
Yeah, I think that just it's all just great character sort of beats and things for each one of them. You get the relationships from the off with Apone and his cigar, and Hudson's already moaning about how cold the floor is. I also think it's interesting that Hicks, even though he's being played by Michael Biehn and probably stood out at the time as being the potential action hero, he kind of blends in with the rest of them and only emerges once the shit hits the fan and he's left alive.
Corporal Kyle Reese.
Yeah.
As sort of one of the things that I liked about it is that despite the fact you're introduced to all these Marines at the beginning, there's no particular highlight that says, oh, this is the little band that you're going to have by the end. A lot of films now sort of obviously signpost and go, well, we're giving this one plenty to say here, and we're giving this one plenty to say here, and you're like, oh, well, those are the ones that are going to be surviving. Whereas with this, you get introduced to the whole band, and you don't really know who's going to go on.
Yeah.
I always liked Vasquez for some reason. There was something that always stood out to me about her. I think it's the fact that she's the only female Marine in the bunch, and she can kind of hold her own against the rest of them.
She's not the only female.
There's
three.
There's at least two more, yeah.
4. There's a pilot. There's 2 women in the actual shooting group, and then Ripley. There's 4.
Well, she's the prominent one.
Ripley isn't a Marine.
But, okay, so there's 3 Marines that are female, and then there's Ripley. That's 4.
Yeah. Obviously, as one of the
the
survivors of the first assault, Vasquez does stand out. But I think that she, she obviously gets some good lines to begin with, kind of holds her own amongst the group of mainly guys, and her relationship with Drake, I think it is interesting as well. Like, they seem like a good team, and that they're, when he gets taken out, she obviously feels it because they were like buddies.
And I think she inspires Dizzy in Starship Troopers.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Right.
Natalie, any thoughts on Marines in particular other than Hudson?
Nope.
No.
I don't know, it's a bit strange that the Marines are the ones that are now up fighting alien battles.
What do you think of the character of Gorman, Lieutenant Gorman, who's supposed to be in charge of them all, but ends up kind of
stepping to the side? Yeah,
following Ripley's orders, and also, clearly she's
the most experienced of them all.
Well, he's inexperienced.
Also, their elder.
He's inexperienced, and they all know it, and they all kind of treat him like that because they know that he's really green.
Well, he's really green. Is that the thing?
Yeah.
Okay. What? What do you want me to say?
What do you think of the fact that they've got this commanding officer who can't get control?
Well, it just shows a weakness, isn't it?
Do you think that was part of Burke's plan?
To have I suppose so.
He knew he wanted to get some of them killed off, so take this guy who doesn't know what he's doing.
Them to. Yeah, but I don't understand why he completely underestimated Ripley when, if he knew about the aliens and he knew her account of what happened, and even though everyone doubted it and he knew it to be true, I don't know why he underestimated her so much when she's the one that survived. So maybe it's a lesson of don't underestimate Sigourney Weaver.
I think it's all an element of cockiness. It's the sort of thing of, oh well, that was 50 years ago, technology's moved on now, we can deal with anything. It's, she only had one to deal with, and we've got an entire squad of Marines that are going to be able to knock this place out in minutes. And it just doesn't go that way. I don't know if he knows specifically what's there. I mean, he sort of told that investigation party, the mum and dad, to sort of go and look at the craft, but you don't know how long he's been getting reports from that lab. They say they've lost contact, but they don't tell you that they lost contact after the lab had started work, or if, they just lost contact as soon as they started investigating. You'd think they would have fed something back about the state of the colonists, going, oh, we've lost 2 colonists to this.
Well, before
they sort of deploy everything.
They have Ripley's report on disc, as is repeated at least twice. So I guess the Marines will have at least Ripley's account of what went on. They want to read it, although maybe they didn't bother reading it, or maybe it was heavily censored, we just don't know. But yeah, I get the impression that whatever threat we're going into, that was, a bunch of miners managed to defeat that. We're Marines, we'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definite overconfidence. And even though we've mentioned a lot about the kind of the action, the firefights and things that take place in this, after the Marines get kind of decimated to begin with, the remaining party they just have to hole up inside the colony because they have to wait for rescue. And it's interesting that we kind of think of it as being a kind of war movie or a kind of action-packed movie, but then it does come back to kind of hiding out, sealing the doors, and setting up the perimeter, setting up the turrets and stuff. I think it's quite tense there when you get to that point of the movie.
I can't believe it takes them that long to realise that the aliens that are showing up on their motion trackers as being on top of them are inside the ducts.
Yeah, pretty fatal flaw in your motion tracker if it only works in 2 dimensions.
But it doesn't occur to anyone until it's too late. Especially since Newt's been climbing about in the air ducts for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or however long it's been. But no one's thinking, maybe those aliens are climbing around in there too.
It's because people think that they're more clever than everything else.
That was one of my favourite scenes with the aliens sort of coming through the air duct. You know, it was, the tracker's sort of pinging and they're getting closer, and they're in this room. Yeah, it was one of my favourite bits.
Yeah, and it's cool that they kind of reference back to the original where, there's a lot of crawling about in shafts and beeping motion trackers and stuff, and they still manage to kind of evoke that imagery again.
Almost 60 years later.
Even though you've got hundreds more aliens kicking about.
What I don't like is that, or what I do like is that in most sequels where you have sort of one unkillable thing, or just on TV or anything, and suddenly you have to ramp it up to have several unkillable things, and in order to make the heroes stand a chance, those unkillable things are suddenly killable. But I don't get the impression that the aliens are any weaker in numbers, because they pretty much lose every engagement they have with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of.
They have better weapons, of course, but still, they're able to take down one or two of them, but not many.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the first or second one that she's in the loader?
This one.
This one.
Well, because I was watching it and I got really confused between if that's how she'd destroyed something at the end of the last one, or if they were setting it up for the end of the second one. I couldn't remember. And have you all seen that Halloween costume that guy made?
Oh, with the baby in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's pretty cool, eh?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I thought it was pretty cool. That was all I was going to say.
So one of my favourite bits.
Is that what we're on? Are we talking about favourite bits?
Yeah, is when they've got the turrets set up, and I'm not usually a fan of looking at computer screens as action, but watching the counters tick down all the way as the guns go dry, I find really quite tense. And even watching it, for the whatever 20th, 30th, 50th time, I still really like that bit where Hicks is kind of counting down the remaining ammo in the guns, and the aliens eventually kind of stop just in time.
It's when they've got 3 shots left or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to say, actually, what one of my favourite bits is right there, and I'm glad that you didn't.
All right, go on.
I really like when they first encounter the aliens and Ripley is in one of the ships and saying call them back, get them in, blah blah, and the guy's really reluctant to do it because the only way that we see the action is through the really crappy cameras that they have. And I really like that in the first one we would have been first person, seeing all of the action with the aliens and seeing all of the murder, death, kills and stuff, but we're kind of separated from it, and it kind of makes watching what would have been a very similar scene really, really interesting. So I found that it's maybe not my favourite scene, but I really appreciated that scene in keeping it quite fresh, because it is a sequel. It's the same sort of bad aliens. We've got the aliens and stuff. They're doing the same thing. They're killing in the same way. They're having people's faces, and they kept it fresh by having that be your viewpoint into the action.
It makes you feel quite helpless as well, because
you're separated from it.
You're watching along with Ripley and the others, and you just see them all getting kind of picked off, and these Marines that we're sort of introduced to as badasses who just are so easily dealt with by these aliens.
Yeah. But I really like that scene just because I don't know, it's weird that it makes me think of the first one, but it makes me just feel like watching something super, super fresh. Maybe not super fresh. I don't know. Yeah, I just like it.
Any particular standout moments for you guys?
I always like the scene where they're trapped in with a facehugger, because it comes from anywhere, or it can come from anywhere.
Cute.
It's so cute.
It is so cute.
It's cute in that scene.
I mean, the thing is, it doesn't have the same effect as in the first one, of course, where you think where anybody's kind of expendable. Obviously, viewing it from years on, you know that Ripley's the survivor, but if you kind of put yourself in the mindset, it's anybody's expendable, so any scene is, any scene has jeopardy. But I kind of don't feel the same level of jeopardy for Ripley in this one, because I feel like she's the experienced one. She's going to get out of it. Here's this is the person we're following. Plus, I don't think James Cameron's even going to kill a child. So
watch this space.
Except in Titanic, where he kills several, but
he kills everyone.
Hundreds.
That's a true story, though.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's nothing he can do about that. Yeah. But anyway, that scene I always found quite tense because the room's quite busy. There's so many things it can hide behind, and you get the kind of the noises and the scurrying noises, and it's really cool.
I love it. I wouldn't say it's scurrying; it's like scuttling. It's really like it makes me think of like a Jim Henson puppet or something. I think it's really cute.
There's also been there was the nightmare sequence at the beginning when she's sort of back at the space station and thinks that she's, that there's a chest burster about to erupt out of her. And so I don't know if it kind of comes across during that scene as well that it might be this nightmare, because she kind of jolts awake and as you say, it's all very tense. You kind of see these big jars kind of rocking on the floor. I just wonder if face huggers are daft enough that they wouldn't be able to sense that there were potential targets right there straight away and just go right in.
Yeah.
They think they have to search around to find a face to hug and kiss.
Well, it looks like they don't have any eyes, so there must be some kind of echolocation going on.
One hell of a nose.
Yeah. Maybe if you hold perfectly still, a face hugger can't find you.
What if they've just got tiny eyes?
It'd be, yeah. You can't really see much behind all that vagina imagery.
What if they've adapted where they can see but they don't have what we would call eyes? What if it's like their entire head is like an eye?
You'd have to ask one of the dead lab technicians that were studying them.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know.
I suppose normally their victims are kind of presented to them, so they don't really have to go very far from hatching to attaching. Yeah.
When you were talking about the nightmare sequence near the beginning, I kind of took issue with that because it wasn't clear if that was before she'd woken up properly. So if that's the case, then how does she know Burke and how does she know what he sounds like?
Yeah, I was
she's dreaming about meeting him,
Yeah, and then when he talks to her, it's as if they've already met. So
yeah.
I don't know. I just took that as kind of shorthand for this is all kind of gone on.
Maybe it really happened.
Chris, any standout moments for you?
You've said some of my favourites, but I think the reveal of the alien queen's pretty cool. When they sort of step through and they're surrounded by all the eggs. You sort of you wonder how they're going to get out of that, and the slow reveal of the queen, I think, was brilliant. That and the mech suit fight at the end, where the sort of the door slides open and she's there in the big mech suit.
Yeah. Yeah, the Queen's an interesting one because obviously now we all feel quite familiar with it, but I wonder what it would have felt like at the time. This was the sort of first variation on the xenomorph. The originals are pretty horrific, and then you've just got this disgusting giant egg sack alien queen. I can't even remember seeing it for the first time. Again, it's not another one of these images that I've become so used to that it's so difficult to imagine or think of the time at which I would have had a first reaction to it.
I'm wondering if the space jockey gave birth to that alien queen.
You think so?
Well, obviously the fossilized corpse has an exit wound.
Yep.
So they don't find the fossilized corpse of an alien anywhere. I mean, they don't really look, I suppose, but it could stand to reason that would be the Queen. And if Ridley Scott's listening, I don't want the answer to that mystery.
Maybe he doesn't know the answer.
He'll make one up like he did in Prometheus.
What was the question?
Does the space jockey birth the alien queen? What comes out of a space jockey?
What's a space jockey?
The engineers from Prometheus.
No, that's not who they are.
What?
The corpse they discover in the first one, the giant alien corpse with a elephant face.
Oh, nah.
I thought that was because they had the big mask on with the sort of
No.
tubing.
No.
What?
No,
Oh,
you're referencing things that don't exist.
Getting into
So far.
deep lore.
I don't know, I feel like I don't know enough of this to know what the hell's going on right now.
Don't worry, it'll be explained in multiple sequels from now.
Good.
I remember being at school and people being utterly mesmerised by the idea of strapping a pulse rifle to a flamethrower. It was like the badass thing they'd ever seen, you know, like that was like some great improvisation by Ripley, I think. And she got to use the grenade launcher, which Hicks said she wouldn't have to.
Yeah, it was a good job she asked to be shown it. Otherwise, that would have been embarrassing.
Do you buy that the alien queen can just latch onto the shuttle and make it back to the Sulaco?
I don't see why not. They're pretty resilient creatures. I mean, in the first one, it survives out in space for a while until it gets, hit by the engine, and even then, it's still alive for a bit. So, yeah, an alien queen could make it through the atmosphere. Plus, you don't really know how thin the atmosphere is on LV-426 at this point.
Also, I wonder what their evolution process was. Do you think they started out as like fish?
I think they started out as little black worms.
Cute. I can see that happening.
Something that will be explained in yet another later point.
Oh.
So, what do you think? Is the ending with an airlock a bit too similar? Is that the only way you can dispose of an alien that's made its way onto your ship?
Yeah.
I always felt that the ending is like 20 minutes after it should have ended. I feel like the nuclear explosion that decimates the colony, that feels like a finishing point to me. You could roll credits at that point and everything's kind of resolved.
Mm-hmm.
But once they get onto the ship and then the Queen attacks, I'm like, oh man, this is still on.
No, because if it had just ended with that, everyone would have been like, oh, that's too easy. You need to have like the final showdown. You need to have that one-to-one battle. And I think that you have to dispose of them in the airlock if you value your own life, which they obviously do, because otherwise they would have laid down and died. Because you can't spill their blood. Because it would eat your ship.
True.
You'd
So
end
you
up
have
with
to
a
do
rather
it-
large hull breach.
You have to do it in a way that's going to stop any acid blood.
How
Getting
hard
into
was the
your
fight?
ship.
How hard was the fight against the Queen and Alien trilogy? Just having nightmares to that, flashbacks to that right now.
I think though maybe it is a bit of a sort of callback to the original, and maybe, as you're saying, Natalie, they feel like they need to have a kind of showdown rather than just having it nuked from orbit. Yeah. Although I think that nuking it from orbit would seem like a kind of fitting end to a movie that's supposed to have kind of been beefed up. It's very militaristic. There's a lot more weaponry, and so yeah, why not dropping a nuclear bomb on the aliens or whatever aliens remain down there does seem like a pretty macho way of dealing with them.
Yeah, I'd say so. I just always feel like the ending part is not tacked on, but it kind of feels like, oh look, this feels resolved now. And then I suppose it's the surprise that, oh my god, it's still alive. But then, do you need it? Maybe not.
But it's a classic trope, though, isn't it? The whole, they're still alive, they're behind you. It's like, it is what people would have expected, and I think it's what people would have wanted. There's like a certain level of satisfaction out of having that sort of reprise at the end of a little battle.
Some hand-to-hand combat.
But if you don't like it, Craig, you can just hit stop.
Just believe that it's over.
You can watch it to the satisfactory ending and just pretend that's the end.
I do have films where I have done that. Source Code, I stop at about 5 minutes before it actually finishes. But that's for the Source Code podcast.
Okay. I'm sure everyone's riled up for that.
is the loader versus alien queen fight good? I mean, the loader's pretty cumbersome, and she's like seems like she'd have a bit of agility to get around it. What do you think? Do you think it's realistic that this slow ass loader could go toe to toe?
My memory is so bad. I don't know why we've switched the TV off, because I'd like to have watched this in the background to have reminded myself of what that looks like.
We've learned not to do that.
Why?
There's not really any protection on the loader. You know what I mean? It's not like she's guarded in any way. She's pretty exposed there. And you do think, as much as it's kind of awesome, the reveal with the loader, and you're thinking, oh, that's going to be a cool fight, it is, like you say, a bit slow and a bit cumbersome when you've seen how agile the aliens have been through the film. You know, it doesn't seem like it would work in reality. You know?
Yeah, but it's like real life Transformers versus Godzilla, you know?
Godzilla.
Transformers v Godzilla, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Isn't that just Pacific Rim?
I didn't see that hunk of crap, so I don't know.
Oh, it's an amazing film. Anyway, the cargo loader fight doesn't last that long. Probably rightly so, but there's a bit of stop motion involved in getting the thing to move, which is, probably a bit difficult. And I can see that the Queen would be in a weakened state. I mean, she's just pulled herself off of her egg sac. She's had quite a few grenades to the face. She's escaped through the atmosphere, but while holding on to the bottom of a ship. So, even the strongest of creatures would be a bit out of sorts after all that punishment. So the fact that, she gets toppled over, fair enough.
And Ripley's wearing Reebok trainers, which, it's a great advert for them for kicking alien ass.
Yeah.
Alright. Do you think any of what we've just discussed, our favourite scenes, anything that happens in this movie, surpasses the most iconic moments from the original? When we talked about it before, we were talking about Alien. I mean, there's the chest burster scene, there's the first reveal of horrific face hugging. Do you think that anything in this film stands out more so than any of those moments?
I'd say it does. I think it has its own iconography that has bled into science fiction in general. You've got like I said earlier, you've got the whole marine stuff, the militarization, the sort of badass catchphrases, all that stuff. It's like, I remember watching it with a friend a couple of years ago, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is Halo," and it's like, well, no, Halo is this, and it's, things like that. It inspired so much about kind of science fiction, and it still is. People are still ripping it off in that respect. Mm-hmm. So I think it creates its own new iconic stuff. I can't compare any of the iconography at the original because, you've seen the facehugger, you've seen the alien birth, and this film doesn't make too big a deal of it either. The only shock you get is when they discover that survivor, and everyone in the audience is thinking, yeah, get away from that guy.
We know what's coming.
Yeah, because the obvious does happen after that point.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what do you think?
I think a lot of the obvious stuff, like Craig said, a lot of the reveals have already been done, but it still manages to keep the tension and present some stuff differently. It's just you're not going to get that initial reaction to what an alien looks like or the first facehugger scene because you've already seen it. But I think they do good interpretations and sort of change it up a little.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the most lasting impressions of it are the fact that it's like insanely quotable. There's so many lines from it that can be used and should be used in daily life. I think that's the biggest impression I take away from it. I don't know if any of it kind of is as iconic as the scenes we've been talking about from the original, and it doesn't need to be. I think they maybe went that direction because they've obviously tried to. They don't want to be a direct comparison, take things a bit of a different direction. But I just think the script is amazing. I think there's so many great lines. Natalie, what do you think?
Yes, there are. But the only ones I can think of are the ones that Newt says.
You like all Newt's dialogue?
Well, no, like I like a lot of the dialogue, which they're the only ones I can really remember because we use them in our day-to-day life.
Mostly.
We do though. So like, yeah.
All right.
I feel like I should have prepped some, but I haven't. Sorry. I'm sharing this because it's important.
What?
Never mind.
We've lost her. In terms of what this did for the series, obviously we've some of us have ripped on Prometheus a bit in this pod. Some of us have ripped on AVP, etc. in the past. Do you think this was the beginning of the end for the Aliens series?
Don't start it like that. That's so depressing.
Well, it was
the beginning of the end. It was a good movie. How can it be the beginning of the end?
It was a great beginning, but look what it led to. Do you think everything kind of stems from this?
I think as soon as you do crossovers, like for Alien versus Predator, I'm not a huge fan of Predator, except for the one that Adrian Brody's in, because I love him. So as soon as you start doing crossovers like that, then you're going down a shithole.
Any other thoughts, guys? I mean, was this the beginning of the end?
Well, it's the last good Alien film, isn't it? There's never been I don't really think there's been a good one since. I mean, Alien 3 has its moments here and there, but it's generally quite awful. And Alien Resurrection is just wall-to-wall terrible. Prometheus is dreadful too. I'm going to be controversial and say that I don't mind Alien vs Predator. I find it quite enjoyable. AVP2 is so dark that I've never seen it. It's, not as in thematically, as in there are no lights. Don't know what's going on at any point. But yeah, it's not a good legacy after this point. It's kind of like watch the first two and just never go near another Alien film ever again because there's nothing else that can be done. I don't think nothing's ever shown us anything new to it, and Ridley Scott couldn't do it with Prometheus, and I highly doubt he can with Covenant.
Right. Chris?
I agree, really. After this one, there's not really any that I would go to and go, you know what, I fancy watching a bit of that tonight. I think about Alien 2 is about where I would cut off, really. Mm-hmm. I'm always hopeful that they're going to come back and do something more interesting or different or sort of recapture that glory a little bit, but it's not happened so far.
Yeah, it's tough because this is obviously, I think it's a great movie. I do think it's kind of what it did for the series. The series does kind of lead down the path that we've ended up going down. Whether or not we should blame it entirely, I don't think so. But I wonder why there's never been, sort of direct sequel to this, because this was such a winning formula. They've always tried to kind of take things a little bit differently, and then they started introducing the versus Predator and the prequels and things. But yeah, it seemed like, it seems especially like this is the sort of thing that could have been made into a second-rate sequel of this movie, like Alien 3 or beyond, could have been a more Marines take on more aliens.
Yeah, they could have done that. I mean, obviously you've got the sequel game, Colonial Marines, which is divisive, to say the least.
Really? Does anyone like that?
We played it and we thought it was playable. Never actually finished it, but people like the Colonial Marines. I think that's what they respond to. You've got chapters of Colonial Marines all over the world and things like that. So I'm surprised they haven't been back to them in cinematic glory as yet. And Covenant's not going to do it because it's in the past again.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't blame this film for the rest of them being bad, because it's not James Cameron's fault that other people made bad films. But I'm interested to see what some of our best modern directors could do with it. I'm annoyed that the Neil Blomkamp sequel was canned, because he's a really interesting director and could have done something interesting with it. And I would have liked to see a Guillermo del Toro Alien film. I don't know if he'd ever make one, but I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I think Natalie's behind that.
Yeah.
Well, but I also don't want him to take on somebody else's ideas. I pretty much like his ideas that he's got.
You mean like Hellboy?
But had that? Which one? Had that been made before?
Did
he do the second one?
Well, no, but it was a comic. He was adapting the comic. So it was someone else's
that's
idea.
fine. But what I mean is that Alien is already like an established thing, like as a movie, quite large. So maybe leave that alone. Honestly, why do people have to keep on taking things and just taking them and making them over and over and over again? Like, I talked about this last time. What was it for? What was our last one when I said this? Like, it's enough. Leave it alone.
What would Carter J. Burke do? He'd do it for the money.
Just not. I don't know who that is, but just not. Just stop.
Don't know who that is.
The spacesuit man.
I'm reading the thing. Oh yeah, there. Paul Reiser.
And then
Look,
the penny dropped.
Right. Well, I'm reading the sheet. But
Shattering the illusion.
I'm sure there's
yeah, but the thing is, like, people always people always do this.
It will continue to happen.
Spider-Man. It was Spider-Man. Like, where I'm just like, just stop it. In fact, it was in Logan as well when we said Spider-Man, and then when you were talking about who would replace who, blah blah, and it's just like, just stop. Stop.
It's now
Get
the
on
portion.
to a different story.
It's now the portion of the podcast where Natalie petitions people to stop remaking Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's become we should tick this
stop
box.
Play the sound effect.
We've had enough.
Play the sound effect.
Enough. But people do this with everything though. Like, they remake everything, they have to rehash everything, and it just has to get to a point where, like, do you know what? We don't need to do that anymore. We'll go find an original story or a different idea.
In order for that to happen,
Like-
you have to not watch it. People just have to not turn out, and then, like what happened with Terminator, the latest film, it completely tanked at the box office because it was terrible.
It's because they keep making them, and people are just like, stop. It's because no one has actually stood up and said, do you know what? Maybe there's enough. We've done too much of that. People don't want to see any more of the story, and you've ruined it. There's no one standing up and saying to the people in charge and the people who are losing money on these things, like, stop and go back to the drawing room and do something else.
The drawing room.
The drawing room. So mixture between the drawing board and the boardroom.
Right.
I
Drawing
agree with
boardroom.
Yeah.
I agree with you to an extent, but I also think that when you put fresh eyes on a thing that already exists, then there's ways that you can, well, not necessarily improve it, but there's ways that you can do things differently. And I think Neil Blomkamp would have done that. Whether you might have liked it or not, his Alien film would have been different to anything else we've seen before.
You can say that you could. Okay, so why don't 10, 20, 30 different directors all make a version of Alien, and then we'll see what that looks like. Maybe it'd be interesting if it was done en masse, but for people to turn about, rehash the same shit, like, ain't nobody got time for that. Like, seriously, like, how many years do we have on Earth? Like, and we're watching the same movies over and over again. Can we not just go and look at something else? Do you know what? Right, nah. Like, just, it's frustrating. There's more that you can do. There are more ideas than this.
She's back, ladies and gentlemen.
There are, yeah, I agree, and I think.
So
I don't really
suggest, but there could be fresh eyes doing this, or like a different take on that. Yes, it might be interesting, but I literally don't give a shit. Let's just honestly go on to something else.
Okay, but without that, we wouldn't have a sequel to Alien. So
that's fine. So if you're doing 1 or 2, what are we on? 6, 7? The new Aliens film is probably going to be really good, right? And that's fine. But I'm not up for people. I'm not up for people rehashing shit, and I don't want another Spider-Man.
I think you're a bit late. I think they've already done it.
It's out in like 2 months.
The campaigns, okay. You've got a lot of work to do to stop them now.
Picket line outside the box office.
No, because there's more to life than that.
Right, okay, so we've heard your impassioned treaty against against sequels or against franchises.
Sequels are different. I'm just saying, like,
Remakes.
aye, franchises, remaking, getting new directors in because their fresh eyes can do whatever. Nah,
Well,
like
Alien's
just-
not getting a new director in, they're getting the original director in.
Fixated on these fresh eyes.
No.
I don't
Right,
think
right,
Ridley
we'll-
Scott has
we'll-
anything else to give to this franchise. I think
We're spiraling out of control.
we have to nuke this conversation from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I need more snacks.
All right,
Maybe
all
that's
right.
why I'm grumpy.
Let's wrap it up. Natalie, have you got any final thoughts that don't
Okay,
require you to go on a rant about other films?
my rant is over. I don't need to rant anymore. Aliens. Yep, makes me think of childhood. So make of that what you will.
Things
That
are
explains
suddenly
it.
starting to make sense.
Yeah, it explains it all.
I'm telling you, it was just like my childhood was this and like the actual real crime scene dramas and operations. That's all we watched on TV. That and the Generation Game. I'm glad you.
What
It's an interesting
all
household.
part of life's rich tapestry. Chris, closing thoughts.
No, I really enjoy the film. It's one that I go back and watch every once in a while. So yeah, really enjoyed it.
Craig?
I'm a fan of this film. I'm a fan of the universe. Well, the first two films anyway. Directors keep trying. Well, Ridley Scott keeps trying to disavow the rest of them, but they exist, unfortunately, despite me denying it. But no, I like this film a lot, and I've always wanted to see a bit more from the Colonial Marines. Maybe you could have a Colonial Marines film where they don't fight aliens. I don't know if anybody actually wants to see that, but
Nope.
but you know they must have done other things. You know, they're a military organisation. They must go to other planets and do stuff.
Peacekeeping missions, etc.
Yeah, why not? Let's have a Hicks prequel where he goes and does stuff.
I don't think we need any more prequels, but
No, well, yeah, I'm just surprised that, considering how iconic the Colonial Marines are, you've never seen them again in live action. That surprises me, you know, but no, it's a good franchise from the first two films. Will Ridley Scott do it again? Probably not, but I'll be there, I'll watch it, and we'll see how it goes.
Cool. As far as my thoughts go, it's my favourite of the series. I can watch this over and over again. It's the one I've seen most often, and like Chris, I will just stick it on every now and again, just to reacquaint myself with it. I think it works because it shakes up the original. I really love the alien as a baddie, but I really love the Marines as well as what's supposed to be a badass fighting force, but that end up kind of haplessly getting decimated by hundreds and hundreds of aliens. I think the cast is fantastic. I really love Hudson. I really love Hicks. Ripley's a great hero. Maybe not a fan of some of Paul Reiser's other work, but I think he's a really great slimy baddie in this one. And yeah, as I said before, quotable, just in extreme, just so many great lines from it that I do use day to day and will continue to do so. And every time I watch it, there's like another thing I think, all right, I've got to try and remember that one. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up. If you'll all step into your cryo sleep chambers, I'll just rock you off gently to sleep.
can I take my cat?
Yeah, if you can find him.
I'll see you in 57 years.
Cool.
That's so depressing.
Some of us might even survive for Alien 3.
Next year, coming next year, Alien 3. that'll be
That could be
something.
interesting.
That's when we get to
Yeah.
AVP 2. That'll be the good one. That's in what? 4 years? Something like that?
Yeah. So stay tuned. All right.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night. Thanks for listening to our discussion of aliens. Remember, you can read our articles on Kneel Before Blog, catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and you can find podcasts on iTunes or wherever good podcasts are sold. Game over, man! Game over!